Hey guys, this is Yoda. Blizzard recently just dropped some new tuning on us. It was kind of expected. They all seem to do it on Friday before the new tier. TLDR, Balanced Druid got pretty big buffs. All abilities increased by 8%. Keeper of the Grove is completely irrelevant. Loon's Chosen tier set slightly nerfed. I believe on this nerf mainly applies to single target, not really to AoE. So in keys, Boomkin is looking really good now with an 8% damage increase. Single target, not as good, but I believe it's still getting better, like maybe 5%. Resto Druid did eat a quote-unquote nerf in the form of a bug fix, and they compensated it by buffing the tier set. I believe overall, according to some sources, it's like roughly 15% less healing, which is a pretty sizable hit. I would say Resto Druid is not the own, does not deserve its own tier anymore. Probably just the same, as in the same tier as the other top 3 healers, in my opinion. Brewmaster Shadowpan is eating a pretty sizable damage nerf, so this does not really matter at all because you don't really do any damage with Flurry Strikes itself. This does matter because it'll give you less actual procs, which gives you less shadow damage procs. This line, I believe, is roughly 4 to 5% overall damage. And then this one, I don't really know exactly how much, but I would say somewhere between 5% and 8% overall damage nerf for Shadowpan Brewmaster. And I think that is not really enough to put it in second place in terms of overall damage, especially if you play it with a bunch of raid buffs. So I would say Shadowpan Brewmaster is still going to be the highest damage tank, especially in overall damage. In single target, it may be worse than Thane Warrior, for instance, but in AoE, it's definitely going to be the highest. Enhance gets a small buff for single target. I believe it's like somewhere between 4 to 6%. Don't really think it's going to be super relevant in Mythic Plus, so I don't think it changes much in keys, but in raid it'll be more playable. Still worse than Ellie though, I believe. And Mountain Thane eats a small damage buff. I believe this is roughly 3% dungeon overall and 5% on single target, and no other changes. So we will be updating the tier list slightly from this. I believe Arcane Mage is now the only spec that belongs in S plus tier, with Resto Druid being moved down. Brewmaster, I think, still belongs in S. Honestly, the nerf looks kind of bad, but I'm pretty sure Shadowpan Brewmaster is still going to be by far the highest DPS tank, so it definitely belongs in S tier. I would say, normally you'd say, oh man, it's doing so much damage, surely it belongs to be an S plus tier. But the main issue with Brew, in my opinion, is that it does not have a big ticket AoE CC, such as Paladins like Divine Toll / just Mass Avengers Shields, CH's Silent Sigil, and Prot Warrior's AoE kick. So your group has to work that much harder to make the dungeon work around you. But the damage is extremely high this season, even higher than last season, so it's probably worth working around. The top 3 healers, in my opinion, are these 3. I don't think any of them has a particular edge over the other ones, so I'm just going to leave them all in the same tier. Obviously, Resto Druid is kind of a big question mark right now because on PTR, the bug fixes is not in, so it's hard to actually test it. Been getting a lot of question marks about Prot Paladin S tier. In my opinion, especially at the start of the season, Prot Paladin makes every dungeon much easier, although it does do lower damage than Brewmaster. Obviously, has less damage contribution than most other tanks because there's no raid buff. But the fact that it makes all the dungeons so much easier makes it a really strong pick, especially early season. Later on in the season, once people actually figure out how to do these dungeons consistently without a paladin, I could see it falling behind. But especially at the start, I would say it's definitely really good, especially in pugs, if you're really good at Prot Paladin. Warrior, I have left in A+. I don't remember if it was an S or A+ last time, but I have moved it to A+, mainly because the damage nerf, I think, is like just as significant as Brew, but Brew is like actually doing crazy damage now. And Warrior's damage, I think, is not as high, and it is slightly weak to certain magical attacks, especially, for instance, in Tazareth Streets, that before it was relying on spellblock for, and now it just doesn't have. So we're going to leave Warrior in A+. As for the DPS, everything has not really changed. I would say I did move Sub Rogue up after playing it a bit. I believe Asa and Sub are gonna be played in different keys. Like you'll play Asa in most keys, and then some keys Assassination is really not good, such as Streets, so you could play Sub Rogue there. So I think you probably are going to have to learn how to play both if you want to play Rogue in high keys. Moonkin, we have moved up to A+ tier thanks to the massive damage buff. Moonkin is always a spec, as we all know, it's a caster that has a raid buff and beam, so any signs of like even close to doing high damage and Moonkin is suddenly like a meta contender. That's just how it works thanks to Blizzard's raid buff system, especially with Mage being OP every season. So Moonkin is now in A+ tier, definitely a meta contender. For the rest, I don't think much has changed. Let's go over the list real quick. Warrior covered, Aflock, no changes. Enhance, I don't think deserves to change a tier. Brew, I don't think deserves to change a tier. I think I underrated it last time, honestly. It was probably like higher. It probably belonged in S+, to be honest, with how much damage it was doing. Now I think S is fair. breasted covered, and balance covered. So yeah, those are most of the changes that we covered. This is probably what I'm going with going to the new season. As a reminder, again, at the start of the season, the meta is very undefined. People are going to find ways to make a lot of different comps work, and I'm expecting a lot of people to be testing different stuff, and what people actually end up playing for the long term is not going to be determined until, like, I'd say like a couple weeks after Race the World First, after tuning comes, after a lot of testing happens in keys. So I would say, as always, the only mistake you can make is to pick something now and commit to it for the whole season. In my opinion, it's much better to just make sure that you have all of your alts geared that you can potentially reroll to. Anyway, that is going to be it for the update. Thank you all for watching. Peace out.